Okay, we're going to get started. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And like I said, this is a topic that a few people requested. So we're going to delve into it. And I encourage all of you to give some ideas for topics for future classes, if you would like. You could think of something that you find interesting. Tonight, we're going to discuss Judaism's perspective and Judaism's view on afterlife. Now, the first thing I want to say might surprise you. That is that if you look into the Torah, and when I say the Torah, I mean the first 5 books, the first 5 books of Moses, the Torah, you will not find the word afterlife. You will not find the word, the words heaven and hell. But nevertheless, Judaism has a lot to say about it. So starting with some of the prophets, they make some references to it. But most of what we know about this is from the Kabbalah. Of course, there's many details in the Talmud. There's many details in different places. In various texts, but mostly it's going to be from the Kabbalah. Now, if Judaism has so much to say on afterlife, and it does, so why is it that it's not mentioned in the Torah? The Torah is the source of everything, and almost everything is mentioned in the Torah, at least in some kind of hint, or at least in some type of general way without the details. Why such an important topic? Why is it not mentioned in the Torah? And the reason is because Judaism believes that the most important thing is the here and now. So we're not supposed to be spending our whole life working towards afterlife. And we're not supposed to spend our time thinking and contemplating what is it going to be like after death, and things like that. What's important in Judaism is the here and now, to work, to accomplish, to achieve. So it's really about the here and now. So this is why, of course, Judaism has so much to say about afterlife, and everything that comes after someone passes away. But it's not mentioned in the Torah because that itself is a message. The message that the Torah is giving by not mentioning it in the first 5 books of the Torah, which is the main part of the Torah, is making it clear that the most important thing is to work in this world to accomplish whatever we could accomplish. And it's not about spending all our time thinking about what's going to be after. So that's the introduction. Hello, Olga. Hello, Julian.
Good evening.
Thank you for joining us. We're just getting started. Hello, Nancy. Good to see you.
Yeah.
I'm just getting started, so you're right on time. Okay, so when you say I, what are you referring to? When you say me, when you say I, when you say you, who is that? What is that? What is it a reference to? What are we saying when we say I, you, me? What is it?
Mostly you're referring just to the body, right?
To the body?
Mostly, like
okay.
when you talk about people, like the soul.
To the soul?
Body, yeah.
Anyone? Share something? We're talking about ourselves all the time. We're always saying I, we live in the age of I, the iPhone, the iPad, everything is about the I. What is the I? When we talk about me and you, what is it that we're talking about? What is me and what is you?
I think it's the perception that we are an individual entity with identification, self-identification, I guess.
An individual entity. That's good. I like that. I think
about the brain, or
or the brain or the soul, depending on how you want to
Right.
look at it.
Is that Yoav?
Yeah. Sorry, I just
Hello, Yoav. Good to see you. I mean, we hear you. Good to hear you.
You can hear me.
Okay.
No, I'm saying the brain or the soul.
The brain or the soul. That's good.
Or both.
I like that. I like that, Yoav. Oh, both. Very good. So when you say you know someone, I know someone. I know a relative. I know a friend. What is it that you know? So Julian mentioned individual entity. Yoav mentioned soul and brain. You mentioned body and soul. So we're getting different things. So these are all good answers. We're trying to figure out what is the core of the person. So when you talk about yourself, when you talk about knowing someone, who is it? What is it that you know, and what is it that you are? And what the Kabbalah says, and I think that in a way, all of you are kind of touching upon this. What the Kabbalah says is that it's the soul. The soul. What is a person? A person is the soul. So it's the character of a person. Now, the character includes intellect and emotion, right? So the brain and the heart. So the character is attached to the soul, says the Kabbalah. The body is a garment, so to speak, of the soul. So just like when you wear a shirt, let's say, so your sleeve is moving, but really it's not the sleeve that's moving, it's your arm and your hand that's making the sleeve move. And the Kabbalah says the same thing is with your body and your soul. Your body is moving, but that's because it's the soul that's giving it life. And actually life is the soul, and your character and who you are as a person is the soul. And I think the best proof of this is when somebody dies. So if somebody passes away, so the body could be complete. All of the organs could be complete. You have the brain, you have the heart, everything is there. What's missing?
So
Life. Life is missing. So what happened? What is life? Life is the soul. The soul left the body. So now it's just the garment, right? So that's what the Kabbalah says. Just like your shirt is a garment to your body, your body is a garment to the soul. So if someone passes away, then all of a sudden the person who you know or the person who you knew is in a way no longer there, because now it's just a lifeless body. So obviously it's not about, when you know someone, it's not the body that you know. Of course, you could recognize the body and his features, that everyone has facial features and your body and how you look, but that's obviously not who you are, because when it's lifeless, then that's not the person. That's not the person who you are. That's not the person who you knew. So that's what the Kabbalah says. The Kabbalah says, who are you? At the core, you are your soul. Now, a body could come to an end, but a soul does not end. A soul does not die. And I prepared a source sheet of a few pieces of text that we could look at. And as usual, it is, if you would like, we'll read it out loud, but if you'd like to see it in the text, it's at jewishiceland.com/download. jewishiceland.com/download. Here's Pavel, here's a paper for you.
Thank you.
Pavel is joining us in person, social distance.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're good. Okay, the first text that I'll read out loud. If you don't have it in front of you, it's okay. It's very short, and I'll read it out loud. It says like this: "And the dust returns." This is from Kohelet. It's from the scriptures, and it says like this: "And the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it." So the dust is referring to the body. The body returns to the earth, and olive oil only. and the spirit returns to God. The spirit is the soul, so that returns to God who gave it. So what does the Kabbalah say? The Kabbalah says that only a body could die, only a body could come to an end, but a soul, which is life itself, soul, the definition of a soul is life, that can never die. So that's why, what does death mean? The word death, if you look in the dictionary, what does it mean? It means, however you explain it, it means an end. Life came to an end. So death means some type of end. But Judaism does not call it death. Judaism has a different word for it. Judaism calls it niftar. Niftar means passing on. So a person passes away. Now it's not just a word, and it's not just a term. It actually has an important meaning, an important message, and that is that even though the body comes to an end, but the person, and now we establish that the person is the soul. The soul doesn't die. The soul doesn't come to an end. It merely passes on. It goes away from this world and it goes somewhere else. Where does it go? We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But the soul doesn't die. The soul doesn't die. It only passes away. It passes on from one place to another, from this world to another place. This explains a very important and interesting custom in Judaism. And that is that when someone passes away, they're supposed to be buried as soon as possible. In places like in Israel and in in large Jewish communities where they have more of an infrastructure, very often they will bury a person who passed away on that very day, on the day of their passing. It's considered to be important to do it as soon as possible. But even if it can't be done on that day, it should be done the next day or the day after that. It's always supposed to be as soon as possible, as soon as possible.
There's some keeper, who's watching the body and cannot go.
Yeah,
in Judaism, I think.
there's a custom that someone should stay with the body for the duration of that time until it's buried, and there's the different customs surrounding that. But what's the reason for that? The reason for that is because the Kabbalah says the body is like a garment to the soul. Now the soul, it moves from one place to another, it moves from this world to another place. But in order for it to receive its new garment, the old garment has to be put away. So it's important for the soul that the body is buried as quickly as possible. That way the soul could get its next garment more quickly. So that this explains the importance and the reason for this custom. But it's all the same idea. It's all the same idea that who are we? We are the soul. The body is considered to be a garment of the soul. And while the body could die and the body comes to an end, the soul, which is life itself, lives on forever, and it only goes to another place, and we'll talk about where that is in a few moments. Any comments or questions on what we talked up until this point? Okay. Yeah.
Yes, I'm also at some point, if you can touch into, I guess, what is the practical result of how we are supposed to behave, how attached are in Judaism these ideas of a reward, that we are supposed to behave good or not because we are going to have a reward or not later.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Is not something very Jewish to think about.
Great question, Julian. We're going to talk about that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the journey of the soul and a bit later on in this conversation, we're going to answer Julian's question, and we're going to get more involved in those details. So the purpose of the soul, says the Kabbalah. Again, most of what we're going to talk about tonight comes from the Kabbalah, because the Kabbalah has most of the details, the most of the information on this topic. What's the purpose of the soul? Why does the soul come to this world? So the Kabbalah says something that we already know, that every person, every soul has a mission. And everyone has a specific mission. Everyone has something particular that they need to accomplish. But in general, every soul is responsible to do mitzvot and Torah study. This is something that everybody shares. Of course, every individual has their own individual mission, but this is a general responsibility. Everyone has the responsibility of Torah and mitzvot. Now, and basically serving God and bringing holiness and spirituality into this world. Now, in order for any mission, especially such an important mission, in order for this mission to be significant, there must be free choice, right? Because if there's no free choice, if everything is predetermined, then there's nothing special about accomplishing the mission or not accomplishing, right? It's only because we have free choice that now the mission becomes significant. You could work on it, you could ignore it. There are choices here, and then it has real significance because there's something that you can do about it, either for it or against it, or just nothing at all, just ignoring it. So in order for there to be free choice, says the Kabbalah, godliness and spirituality cannot be the obvious truth of the world, right? In order for someone to have free choice, to say, I choose to do something for God, that's only significant, that's only meaningful if that's not the obvious thing to do. If it's not the clear and most straightforward and obvious thing to do. Because if it was, then you didn't really, there's nothing special about achieving something that is so obvious and so simple and so clear. So in order for this mission to have real significance and real meaning, there has to be free choice. In order for there to be free choice, spirituality cannot and godliness cannot be the obvious truth. On the other hand, in order that there should be free choice, the spiritual darkness also cannot be too strong, because otherwise, how could we succeed? Right. So there has to be, what I'm getting at is this: there has to be some type of balance. In order for you to be responsible for a certain mission, in order for you to be held accountable for doing something, there has to be some type of balance. If you're pushed too much to one side, then yeah, of course you're gonna go in that direction. If you're pushed if you're pushed by powerful forces to the other side, so you can't be blamed for going the other way. So in order for there to be a real significance and real choice here, there has to be like this balance between the good and bad, or physical and spiritual, and all of that. So spirituality and godliness cannot be the most obvious thing. But also, if there's too much spiritual darkness, then how could we succeed? How could it be a fair balance? Okay, So to answer this question and to explain this balance of how it works, I'd like to look into the next piece of text, which comes from the Talmud. The Talmud is in tractate Nida, page 30b. And you could see this, the second paragraph on your source sheet is just 2 sentences. So if you don't have it in front of you, it's no big deal. I'm going to read it out loud. It says like this: the fetus in its mother's womb is taught the entire Torah. When its time comes to emerge into the atmosphere of the world, an angel comes and slaps it on its mouth, making it forget everything. That's what the Talmud says. So first, the fetus learns the entire Torah, but before it has a chance to remember anything, you know, it's slapped and it forgets the entire Torah. So let me ask you, what's the point of teaching it if you're going to make him or her forget the whole thing anyways? What's the point? This is the question that the Kabbalah asked. What's the point of teaching a baby the entire Torah if you're about to make it forget it? What's the point?
Intuitive knowledge, like some sort of essential truth that it will know that this is the truth, something like that.
Oh, excellent, Yoav. That's exactly the answer. The answer is that this is the point. This is how there's this balance of godliness and spirituality on the one hand, but also that it's not the obvious truth. This is how this balance is created. So what's the point of teaching the entire Torah if it's going to forget it? The answer is that deep down in a person's conscious, something was affected, right? So when the baby is taught the entire Torah, even though it forgets the whole thing, but an impact was made. An impact was made, and somewhere deep in the soul of the person, of the child, of the baby, and then when it grows up, deep down, we know that God is the truth. Deep down, we know that. So this is how there could be this balance. So on the one hand, you know, it's very easy to go through life without paying attention to it. Very easy to ignore it. But on the other hand, if somebody wants to get in touch with that, you know, with that deep part of themselves, it could always be revealed. It could always be, tapped into. So yeah, the Torah is on an intellectual level. The Torah is taught to the child, and the child forgets the whole thing. But the point is that a certain impact was made. A certain impact on the core of the person is made, and now a person has the choice to either, you know, ignore this deep truth that it knows at its core, or it could explore it. Okay, so this is what the Kabbalah says. The reason why we have this angel teaching the entire Torah and then making the baby forget the whole thing, and this is to keep the balance of the two sides of the struggle of spirituality and godliness. Okay, so we're talking about the journey of the soul, and this is what happens to the soul before the baby is born. Before the baby is born, there's already an impact made on the soul, so that it has the ability to have this feeling of spirituality and to be able to touch deep into their soul and find that truth of godliness. Okay, so this is all before the baby comes into the baby is born. Next comes life, physical life, and this is the only time that the soul could really achieve and could really accomplish. And this is what I was saying before. This was the introduction that I was making at the beginning of the class. Why the Torah does not talk about afterlife. Why the Torah does not talk about the world to come and life after death. The reason is because our lives, says Judaism, the most important thing for us to focus on is the here and now. And the reason for that is because this is the only opportunity that the soul has to work, to achieve, and to accomplish. So this is starting to answer Julian's question. We're talking about good and bad. This is the only time that the soul has to do good. And of course, doing good is not necessarily the popular thing to do, and it's not necessarily the obvious thing to do. But this is the only chance that the soul has to accomplish. So the soul, before it comes into the body and before the baby's born, the soul can't do anything. Once the person passes away, the soul also can't do anything. So the opportunity that the soul has to grow and to work and to accomplish, that is only during the lifetime, when the soul is dressed into, so to speak, when it's dressed into the body. And I want to point to the next piece of text. This comes from this also comes from the Talmud, Tractate Eruvin, page 22. You can see it's the third piece of text on your page. Again, it's short, so if you don't have it in front of you, it's no problem. JewishIceland.com/download. Quote, "You shall keep the mitzvah, the decrees, and the laws which I command you today to do them." This comes from Deuteronomy, the 5th book of Devarim. So this is quoted by the Talmud. The Talmud quotes this verse and says, today to do them, quote, today to do them, explains the Talmud, but not to do them tomorrow. Today to do them and tomorrow to receive the reward. So today is a reference to life, body and soul together, and tomorrow is a reference to the world to come, to where the soul goes after life. So the Talmud is making this point that today is to do. Today is to do. Today is the time to accomplish. Everything. Once tomorrow comes, we cannot achieve anything more. The time has passed. The opportunity has passed, and today is to do, and tomorrow, in the world to come, reference to the world to come, that is when there is a reward. Okay, so this is just making the point that we're saying now. So we're continuing with the journey of the soul. First, we talked about the soul before birth. Then we talked about the soul during the lifetime. I know we're going through it very quickly, but this is because most of the discussion tonight is about afterlife. So what happens when somebody passes away? So maybe just another sentence or two on life itself, just because Julian brought this up. Very important question. We're going to talk about it more, and we're talking about working and accomplishing. What is it that we need to do? What is it that we need to accomplish? And how is the soul judged later on? It's by our mission. And first and foremost, when we talk about good, of course, it's good what everyone calls good. Good is what most fair-minded people consider good, what the world considers good. But for us as Jewish people, that also includes mitzvot, so the commandments, which are not only between person to person and doing acts of kindness and favors and things like that, but also between us and God, doing things for God. And of course, there are so many mitzvahs and so many examples that we could talk about, many of which you already know. So when we talk about good and the soul accomplishing its mission, so of course everyone has a specific mission, like we mentioned before, but the Kabbalah says that Judaism says that for Jewish people, good must include Torah and mitzvot. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about good and bad. And of course, we're going to talk about reward and punishment later on in just a moment. So what happens when we're up to the third stage, when the soul passes on? Okay, so the journey of the soul, we had the soul before birth, the soul during life, when the body and soul is together. Now we're going to talk about what happens to the soul when it passes on. So we know what happens to the body. The body dies. The body comes to an end. What happens to the soul, and what is it like for the soul? And when we talk about the soul, it's easy to talk about it like some abstract thing, but like we mentioned in the beginning, the soul is who we are. The soul is our character. It's the core of us. It's the core of who we are. So when we talk about the soul, let's remember that this is actually us. This is the main part of us, because the body, while we're living life, it's very easy and it's the natural thing to think about your body as who you are. It's only when you think about it more deeply that we realize that it must be something more. But I think it's good to keep in mind that when we talk about the soul, we're talking about who we are, our character, and our very core. This is us. So what is it like for the soul? How does the soul feel when it passes on? So the first thing is that the soul has feelings. Just like the soul has feelings when it's in a body, it continues to have feelings even once it passes on and it leaves the body. For its part, the soul remains involved in the lives of the people who it left behind. So, for example, a parent who passes away, the parent continues to watch over and to see what's going on with his or her children and grandchildren or great-grandchildren, whatever it might be. And they derive pride and pleasure from seeing them, their accomplishments, or pain if they're not doing well. So the soul has feelings about itself, but it also remains involved with and connected to the people who it knew during its lifetime, this world. Not only that, the soul could intercede on behalf of people who it left behind. So if someone is having, if a family member or a friend or someone in the community, someone is in need of something, it's possible for the soul who passed on to ask and to beg on behalf of the person in this world who needs help. So all of this is what the Kabbalah says. Of course, this is not a science. This is not something that we could study in a lab. We only know this because the Kabbalah says it. It's not, we don't have an understanding of souls and the journey of a soul. But this is what the Kabbalah says. The Kabbalah says that there is still this connection between the soul that passes on and the people who it left behind. In fact, says the Kabbalah, because the soul is now not limited to the body, right? So when a soul is living in a body, so a body has certain limitations. You're limited by time, you're limited by space, you're limited by all types of limitations. But once the soul leaves the body, it no longer has these limitations. And in a certain way, there could be a deeper connection between the soul and the people who it left behind, right? So of course, when someone passes away, if it's someone who we know, especially if it's a family member, we miss them dearly. But in a certain aspect, says the Kabbalah, there could be a more powerful connection between the soul and the people who are left behind. Now, this is how the soul, feels and connects to people who are left behind. What does the soul feel about itself? How does the soul feel about it passing on? So first of all, the transition from life as we know it, the transition that the soul has to make from its body, and moving on from the body is not always so easy. So sometimes we have examples in the Torah where there's a very smooth transition between this world and the next, where the soul goes. And a very interesting example and very descriptive example is how Moshe passed away. And Moshe's death, or Moshe's passing, is described in great detail in the Torah. And what it says is, I'll just say it in short, is that God told him that he was going to pass away. He knew where he was going, so he went up to the mountain, and he was going to pass away on the mountain. And God told him, each step, what to do. He first removed his garments, one at a time. And then finally, the last thing that the Torah says is that God kissed Moshe, so to speak. Obviously, it's not in the physical way like you would imagine, but what that means, says the commentaries, is that God took Moshe's soul directly back to him, right? So God is the source. God is, our soul is a piece of God. So what happened with Moshe was there was a very smooth transition. The soul went straight from Moshe's body, straight back to the source. But that's not always the case. It's not always such a smooth transition for the soul to leave the body and for the soul to leave this world. Sometimes it could be quite difficult. And very often the soul will linger around, and the soul will kind of hover around the space that it knows and the space that it remembers. And many customs that we have in Judaism, many customs that are related to a person's passing, and the customs that surround that, they all have very deep significance. We mentioned one before about the burial being as soon as possible, and I'll mention another very interesting and perhaps unusual custom. And the custom is like this: that normally there's a shiva house. That means that when someone passes away, so there's a mourning process, and after the person is buried, there's first there's the mourning before the person is buried. That's one stage, but then there's another stage once the person is buried. It's considered to be the 7 days of mourning. That's what the word Shiva means. Shiva means 7, and it's a reference to the 7 days of mourning. And then after the 7 days, there's a 30-day period. That's it's the next stage, it's the next level. And then there's the entire year, 12 months. Which is also, there's a certain level of course, the mourning is lessened, and while we still miss the person who passed away, of course, the mourning is in a different way. So there's the 7 days, the 30 days, and the 12 months. And perhaps the most important part is the first 7 days. And the first 7 days, the family, and it's called sitting Shiva, because they sit on low chairs. That's a sign of mourning, and there are many customs surrounding that. But one of the things that they do in a Shiva house, besides for talk about the person and to give comfort to the family and to the people to the people who, who lost a relative, a family member, or a friend. Besides for all of that, there's a custom to pray together, to make a minyan and to pray together 3 times a day for the 7-day period. And included in the prayer is the famous Kaddish prayer, which we say when somebody passes away. And the mourners are the ones who say the Kaddish prayer. So everyone prays, but only the mourners say the Kaddish. Now, what happens if there are no mourners, or there are no family members who are mourning, and there's no shiva house, right? What if there are no people, at least in the city, who are mourning, in the deceased person's house, right? So what happens? So there's a very interesting custom. You would think, okay, so if they have a friend or an acquaintance, so they think about them and things like that. But the halacha, the custom is very, very interesting. The custom is that even if there are no mourners, maybe because the person didn't have any children or didn't have any family, or maybe the family is not in this city, they're not here, so they're mourning wherever they live. But the custom is that even if there are no mourners present in this person's home, in the deceased person's home, they should still get together. People should come to the house of the deceased person, and for 7 days. Well, if possible, they should do it for all of the days of the Shiva. But if not, they should at least come once or twice to pray there together, minyan, and to say the Kaddish and to be there. And there should be some type of mourning in the house where the deceased person lived. And what's the reason for this? The reason for this is what we were talking about before, that very often the soul's journey from the body to its next stop is a difficult transition. It's a difficult transition, and very often it lingers around, and it kind of hangs around the space that where it used to be, in the space that it had. Thank you for joining us, Pavel. I'll see you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Sadly, I can't join you for longer, but next time for sure.
I'll see you next time.
See you. Bye.
See you later.
Sorry about that. So this is the reason for the prayer in the deceased person's house, because the soul is there. The soul, or at least the soul could be there, and for a period of time, and to make it easier for the soul, and to make it more comfortable, and to make the transition more smooth and better for the soul. This is the reason why we have this custom that the people should get together, even if there's no family mourning, but people should get together, and they should be the mourners, and they should say the prayers, and they should say the Kaddish. Now, the reason for this, for the difficulty, is not because the soul is afraid of where it's going. On the contrary, the soul is not afraid of where it's going. And we'll talk about where it's going in a second. But the reason why the soul hovers around is because it could be a difficult transition. It could be a hard transition. The change could be very difficult. Not because it's afraid, but because it's a major change and a major transition. And this is the way that we could give the soul a certain comfort, give the soul a certain escort, to make it easier for the soul to make this transition. Okay, fair enough. So where does the soul go? Where does the soul go? A lot of religions talk about heaven and hell and all kinds of things, and all kinds of beautiful things and scary things. Let's find out what Judaism says about where does the soul go. So ask anyone hopefully you don't know anyone like this, but if you ever read about someone who had a near-death experience, what do they say? What do they say when they wake up? What is their, what is their impression, and what is their feeling when they wake up? And I think what you see from many or all of these stories that we hear or see about someone who has a near-death experience, there's always this immense pleasure that that the person experiences. And it might not be specific, and they might not remember everything, and it might be different from one person to another, to people who have near-death experiences. But what we find very often is that there's this very pleasurable experience. And quite often, someone who has like a near-death experience, they're no longer afraid of death for this reason. So what happens to the soul after it leaves the body? Where does it go? So the Kabbalah tells us that the first thing is angels welcome the soul. Angels welcome the soul, and the first thing that happens, and this is the same for everyone, is that the entire life of the soul, the entire life of the person is played before them. So it's very easy for us to imagine how this is. Imagine if a movie is being played in front of you, and the movie is your life. So what you're seeing is from the beginning of your life until the last day of your life, you're watching and you're seeing a quick version of going through and seeing the entire life, your entire life. Now, this could be a very pleasurable experience, or it could be a very painful experience, or it could be a combination of the two. Now, we have to remember that where is the soul right now? The soul left the body and left this world, and it's being welcomed by angels. So where is it? Where is the soul? The soul is in a space where godliness and God is now the obvious truth. So it becomes very clear, and it becomes very simple fact that holiness, God, and spirituality is the ultimate truth. Now, when the soul feels this, and when the person, we could call it the person because the person is the soul, when the person realizes this, then all of a sudden, when its life is played before her or him, so it could be very pleasurable, and it could be very painful, because now the truth is very obvious. So if something is played on that screen, so to speak, that's contrary to goodness and to godliness, then it becomes very painful for the person to watch that, while it knows at this moment what the ultimate truth is. That's the first thing that happens. After that, there's a certain measurement, calculation, or judgment, whatever you want to call it. And basically, the good deeds of the person are measured against their bad deeds. The good deeds and the bad deeds are measured against each other. Now, it doesn't go by numbers. It's not a numbers game. If you have more good deeds and less bad deeds, it doesn't go by the number, but it goes by what God considers to be more valuable. So sometimes you could have one good deed that outweighs, many bad deeds, or because the good deed was such a powerful good deed. It took so much effort, and it made such an impact. And we in this world today, we don't necessarily know. We cannot necessarily measure the value of deeds. We don't know how God thinks. I mean, certain things we do know from the Torah, but in general, we don't understand the value of what's more valuable and what's less valuable. And this is the calculation or the judgment that happens when the soul when the soul leaves the body, there's this judgment and a calculation where the good deeds are measured against the bad deeds. Now, if someone has majority good deeds and a minority of bad deeds, they go to Gan Eden or heaven or the world to come. It has many names. In Hebrew, it's Olam Haba, Gan Eden. In English, it would be heaven or the Garden of Eden or heaven. So if someone has more good deeds than bad deeds, and again, it doesn't go by numbers, but it goes by how valuable they are, to God. So then they go to heaven. If somebody has more sins, more bad deeds than good deeds, then they go to hell. Now Judaism has a very perhaps different understanding as to what hell is. The first thing is that there's a maximum of 12 months that a soul could be in hell. And after this 12-month period, 12 months is the maximum. After this time, whatever time it is, the soul goes to heaven. So in the end, all souls go to heaven. It's only a question of if it's going to go to hell first, and how long for. Now, what is the how does this work? Why 12 months, and why do also souls go to heaven? What is the Jewish understanding of what heaven and hell is? Specifically, first we're going to talk about hell. So hell in Judaism is described as a place of fire. Now, I know you might hear this from other religions as well, but this might be where the comparison ends. Hell is described as a place of fire, but we now know that we're talking about a soul. The soul is not physical because it already left the body. The soul is not tangible. You can't touch it. Doesn't take up space. So if so, what is there to burn, right? So you're saying hell is a place of fire, but what could be? There's nothing that can be burned, and the answer is that it's a metaphor. Fire doesn't mean that there are flames and there's an oven and there's coals and there's wood and things like that, and all these kind of scary images that they might put on your screens. But fire is a metaphor. Fire cleans metal. Just like fire cleans metal, hell cleanses the soul. So why does a soul need a cleaning? Why does it need cleansing? And the reason is because if a soul behaved not properly, so it accumulates spiritual dirt, if you will. So a soul could accumulate spiritual dirt by doing bad things, and now the soul has to go to heaven. The soul has to go to heaven. Why does a soul have to go to heaven? Because that's where a soul belongs. A soul comes from God. A soul is good. A soul is life. There cannot be anything bad about a soul. So the soul must go to heaven. The problem is that in heaven there's only goodness. There is no space for dirt. There's no space for impurity. Heaven is completely good. So that's why a soul that has spiritual dirt must go through this process of first going to hell, being cleaned. That way it could continue to its final destination. It could go to heaven. Now, if you could think of it like a surgery. A surgery is not a punishment. It might be very painful. It might be very difficult, but it's not a punishment. Surgery is difficult, but it's necessary and it's needed. right? So if something needs to be cured, if something needs to be fixed, this is the way to do it. And it's worth it, because once you come out of the surgery and once you recover, then hopefully your life is back to normal. And the same thing is with hell. Hell is not a space, is not a place where someone is supposed to end up and stay there. Hell is a place for the soul to be cleaned, if it needs to be cleaned, so that it could go to where it belongs to in heaven. Now, this explains why there's a maximum of 12 months in hell, because even if the soul is so dirty, there's a certain time that it takes, but eventually it becomes clean. And so that's why there's this maximum. And after 12 months, in the worst case scenario, it ends up going to heaven. Now, this is why just a second here. I think I had something on my notes that I wanted to mention. Okay, so this is hell. This is hell in the Jewish perspective. Hell is not a punishment. Hell is a place where the soul gets cleaned in order for it to go to heaven. But in the end, all souls belong in heaven. Now, we talked about who goes to heaven and who goes to hell. So if you have more good deeds than bad deeds, you go to heaven. If you have more bad deeds than good deeds, you go to hell. But what about the minority? What about, let's say a bad person. Let's say a bad person, but the bad person also perhaps has a minority of good deeds. So, where does it get a reward for that? Where does it get reward for the minority of good deeds? And the same question is the opposite. Somebody who goes straight to heaven because they have more good deeds than bad deeds. What about the the small number of bad deeds? Shouldn't there be some punishment for that? And the answer is that there is justice for every action, and this comes during the minority is taken care of, says the Kabbalah, during the person's lifetime. So sometimes a very righteous person could go through some very difficult challenges or difficult times during his or her life, even though they're righteous. And of course, it's not for us to judge, and we don't say why something is happening and this person deserves this or this person deserves that. It's not up to us to judge. We can only judge ourselves. We can't judge anyone else. But the Kabbalah says that there is justice for everything, and sometimes if a person is having certain hardship, it could be, the reason might be that God is doing this person a favor. He is sparing them of some time in hell. So in order that they could go straight to heaven, he's allowing them to pay a small price during their lifetime, instead of spending a time in hell, which in the bigger picture is much more painful and much more difficult for the person. So again, it's not for us to judge, and we can't say, something is happening to this person because they deserve it because of this or that. What the Kabbalah is saying is that it could be that if something bad happens to a person, it's because God is in a way helping them, that they should be able to go straight to heaven, and that's of course the greatest pleasure for a soul. Now, I'm going to make a reference to a very difficult subject and a very difficult question, and I don't want to get into it too much. but there's a very difficult question as why do bad things happen to good people, or why do good things, or why do bad people live good lives? And I'm not saying that this is the answer. I'm not giving the answer in one sentence, but this sheds some light onto the answer to this question. Why do good people, why is it sometimes that bad things happen to good people? It could be that it's for this reason. It could be that God is looking at the bigger picture and allowing them the greatest pleasure of going straight to heaven. And we're going to talk a little bit more about heaven in a moment. But this might be a positive thing, even though of course it doesn't look like it and it doesn't feel like it, and it's not something that we could understand. But perhaps, says the Kabbalah, this is, in the bigger picture, this is for the benefit of the person. And again, this is not to downplay any type of pain and suffering, and it's certainly not for anyone to judge someone else and to explain away and rationalize away, certain things that are happening. But this gives us some insight into the topic. And the same thing is vice versa. How could it be that a bad person has such a good life? Oh, they have everything that they need. They have everything that they want. It could be that in the big picture, God is saying, okay, I'm going to give them I'm going to give them the reward now, so that later on, they could get what they deserve, so to speak. So this sheds some light. Again, it's not for us to judge, and it doesn't take away from the pain. It doesn't take away from the suffering, and it doesn't take away from begging God to get rid of pain and suffering. We don't want pain and suffering. We want good, and we want reward that we could appreciate, that we could understand, and we could feel. But nevertheless, this gives us some insight into the matter. Now, back to some interesting customs that surrounds end of life. We say Kaddish for 11 months. There's we mentioned the Kaddish prayer earlier. The Kaddish prayer we say when somebody passes away, and of course we continue to say Kaddish on the yahrzeit, on the anniversary of the person's passing, on the day. But we actually continue to say Kaddish for 11 months. We talked about there's a 1 year mourning period. There's 7 days, the 30 days, 1 year. We say Kaddish for 11 months. Why 11 months? The reason is because this is just in case the deceased person is in hell for a very long time. Kaddish could help them out, and we'll talk about how in a moment. But that's why we say Kaddish for 11 months. If you're probably wondering why 11 months and not 12 months. Before we said that the maximum is 12 months. The answer is that on the one hand, we want to say Kaddish for a long time, just in case the person is in hell for a long time. But on the other hand, saying Kaddish for 12 months is making a statement, because it's basically saying, oh, it's the full amount of time. So that's why, in order not to make the statement, we only do it for 11 months. And everyone is the same. Everyone has the custom to do it just for 11 months. So on the one hand, we're saying that we're going to support them and we're going to help them if they're in hell for a long time. But on the other hand, we're not going to make a statement and say that they're bad people and they're there for 12 months. Now, what does Kaddish do for somebody who passed away? What does it do for the soul? What does it do for the person? So the answer is that we started talking about this before, that the person and the soul could only achieve and could only work and could only accomplish during its lifetime. So the soul could only, grow and become better and accomplish its mission during the lifetime. Once it passes away, it can no longer do anything in this regard. And it makes a lot of sense, because there's no longer this free choice. There's no longer this balance of good and bad. Once the soul comes to heaven, it sees very clearly that God is the ultimate truth. So it sees very, so that automatically there's no free choice. If you knew, imagine somebody put on your table, you have a choice. You could choose $1 million or you could choose $1. You have a choice. Of course, that's not a choice because the options chose for you, right? If it's very clear to you that $1 million is more valuable than $1. So that's not a choice that you made. It's the option that made the choice for you. Yeah, if you're an idiot, then maybe you'll take the 1. But any person who is in their right mind will choose the 1 million. So that's what I mean when I say that there's no free choice. Theoretically, yes, you could choose, but in this case, the option is so clear and so obvious that it's kind of choosing for you. And the same thing is when the soul comes to heaven. It's so obvious that good is the truth and that God is the truth that you would never think to do anything else. So that's why the soul cannot continue to achieve and to continue to do its mission at that time, because now there's no point, there's no challenge, there's no significance to it, because it's no big deal. There's no challenge. So nevertheless, even though the soul cannot accomplish anything and cannot grow and cannot do anything on its own behalf, nevertheless, something could be done by people who are still alive in this world. And what I mean by that is that someone who in this world, let's say a family member, a descendant, or someone else, it could be a friend, it could be a community member, it could be anyone really, someone who does a mitzvah in the merit of the deceased person, or for the elevation of the soul of this deceased person, not that it could, but it definitely helps and supports the soul and the person who passed away. So the soul cannot do anything for itself once it passes on, but someone else in this world could do something on behalf of that person. So that's why you might see, if somebody does a mitzvah, if somebody does a contribution of any kind, whatever it might be, if someone is studying Torah, they could say, we're studying Torah in the merit of my grandmother, or we're studying Torah in the merit of someone else who passed away, or I'm donating a synagogue or a Torah in the merit of so and so. And this is quite common, because the Kabbalah tells us that we could help souls that are in hell or in heaven. So if the soul is in hell, then we could help it that it shouldn't have such a difficult time. It shouldn't have such a difficult time. So we're kind of lifting them up and helping them and making it a little bit better for them. And if they're in heaven, then it also lifts them up and gives them a better experience, a better time. And we'll talk about in just a second, we'll talk a little bit about what heaven is. But my point is that we as people living here in the here and now, we have a tremendous opportunity and tremendous ability, first and foremost for ourselves, for us to complete and to do our life's mission and to focus on good, to focus on positivity and the Torah and mitzvot and things like that. But we also have a tremendous power of helping people who already passed on, to make it easier for them and more comfortable, and a support for them. Okay, so I think we talked enough about hell. We'll take a few minutes to talk about heaven. But okay, does anyone have a question on, or any kind of comment on what we said up until this point? Anyone? Okay. I'll continue. Of course, feel free to write down questions if you want to discuss
Avi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm a little bit curious. I'm not curious, but trying to understand if I guess if the soul goes to hell and it's not a punishment, but still suffers, right? And it's something that you don't want for you to happen. Basically, you rather go straight to heaven than go through hell. It still works as I guess as a tool or a way to regulate the behavior of people when they're alive, right? Because you will behave in a way that you will do things that will, I guess, increase your chances of not decrease your chances of going to hell and increase your chances of going to heaven straight, right? So even though it's not very clear why it would not be what is the difference between being a punishment or not, because basically if the thing that will happen to you if you behave badly, and then if you don't behave badly, then it doesn't happen to you. You know what I mean?
That's a great question. I think what your question is, what's the difference practically? What's the practical difference if it's a punishment or it's a cleaning process? Did I understand you?
Yeah, and I guess because the common way to see hell is basically, or this idea that people behave well because they don't want to be punished in the afterlife, which is something I don't really like. I don't, I
Right.
don't agree with it.
Like that we are afraid of this, so we behave.
Right. So I think I'll make a few points. I think the first point to answer your question is that saying that hell is a cleaning process means that it's only until the soul is clean, right? So let's say in other religions, for example, where they say you're going to hell if you did something bad. I think what they mean is that you're there to stay. That's your punishment, and you'll be there for eternity. So I think the first thing is that if we're saying that we're cleaning, so it could be a very short time. It could be a very short time. Number two, what I would say is that I do feel that there is a very big difference between a punishment and a consequence. So when you tell a kid, don't run around barefoot on the wooden balcony because you're going to get a splinter, right? And then they don't listen because they don't care. And then you say, you know what? Don't run around on the balcony barefoot because you're going to get a splinter. Then you're going to have to go to the hospital, and they're going to have to take out the splinters, and it's going to be very painful. So yeah, on the one hand, you could say, why did the kid stop? Because the kid is afraid. But I think that it's only a kid who would perhaps not have let's say a very young child who would not have the maturity to appreciate that removing the splinter, removing the wood from the foot is not a punishment, but actually the doctor is helping you. So I think what I'm trying to say is that, yeah, it might be painful, and it might be a reason to, let's say, behave, better, so you don't go through that. But I still think that there's a fundamental difference to when you understand that this is for your benefit. The child is wheeled into the surgery room to fix up the foot. I think there's a fundamental difference if the child understands that his father is going to come in and punish him and hurt him because he disobeyed, or if doctors are coming to heal him and to help him and make it better, even though it's going to be painful. My third point is that Judaism does not play the hell card. Judaism does not play the fear card. So what I mean by that is, I mentioned this twice in the class already, that the Torah does not even talk about heaven and hell. So the first reason is because it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is the here and now, like I mentioned earlier. But I think another aspect to that is that the Torah doesn't want you to be good because if not, you're gonna be beaten up and you're gonna be punished. The Torah wants you to do good because of the value that the good has. So it's not about being threatened and afraid that something bad is going to happen to you, and that's why you should do it. So you go into a Jewish school, they're not saying, oh, you better make kiddush on Shabbat or you will be punished. You're not going to hear people talking about that, or at least I hope you're not going to hear people talking about that, because that's not what it is. That's not what Judaism believes. And what Judaism wants is that you should follow the truth because it's true, because it's good, and because that is good for you, that is good for God, and that's good for society, and it's good for the world, and it's good for your mission, and it's good for the world's mission. So the Torah doesn't mention it. Certainly the Torah does not mention it. Even in the Kabbalah, where it does talk about it, it doesn't talk about it in a way of fear and punishment, and you better do this or else. I do not believe that has a place in Judaism. Now, I know your question is, I think your question included, like, what's the practical difference? I'm not sure if I answered your question 100%, but I think that hopefully this sheds some light. What do you think? Does that make any sense?
No, yeah, no, actually, yeah, you clarify, and it's more or less what I thought that the answer was going to be, and I'm glad, because I dislike philosophies that I guess try to bribe you that you are supposed to do good because you're gonna be receive reward or you're gonna be punished. I think we do good because basically there's intrinsic good to be done, and it has nothing to do with what happens at the end or what happens later. So
Right.
I think that we may disagree on the details, but I guess that the fundamental idea is true, is that we do good things because they are intrinsically good, and because that makes the world a better place, not because we're afraid that we're going to be punished later.
That is certainly the fundamental idea. No question about that.
Can I add one thing on that?
Please.
Actually, just thinking about what you guys just said. So, like, for example, in Judaism, like when you teach little children like about mitzvot, so it's very interesting because there is this concept of like not telling children like, don't do this, like, it's Shabbat or something like that. It's more of teaching the child what yes to do, and like kind of there is this do's and don'ts in Judaism. Like there is the good deeds that we do in Judaism. There's the mitzvot, and then there's also the averot, which we try to stay away from. But it's not like it's like focus on the averot, like don't do that. It's more like just like here is what.
See the beauty.
Yeah, here is like the positive. Here's like what we are doing. Like for example, with my children, so there are certain things that they realize is different on Shabbat and throughout the week. So by using Judaism's method and guidelines and just showing them the positive, it really has a strong effect on them. So it's like guiding.
I think it's about showing the beauty and appreciating appreciating the good, because like you said, it's intrinsically good.
Right.
Not because of reward or punishment,
right.
And not as a threat, but because it is intrinsically the right thing to do, the good thing to do, and the beneficial thing to do.
Yeah.
Okay, I see that it's getting late. I don't have so much to say about heaven and you'll see why in a second, but I'll tell you whatever I know. Okay. So the first thing about heaven is that don't expect to understand it. It's like a blind man trying to understand what seeing means, and it's like a deaf man trying to understand what it means to hear. It's a different world. It's a different world. It's not something that we could relate to. We do understand, as humans, we do understand that there are pleasures in this world. Of course, there are very physical pleasures that we all know, but there are also more refined and more spiritual pleasures in life. Music, art, intellectual pleasure. So we do have examples in this world of pleasure that pleasures that are more physical and more more tangible, more physical, and then pleasures that are more refined, more spiritual, more more refined. So we could think of this as a small metaphor for what heaven is. So heaven is a place of pleasure, but it's not a pleasure that we could understand, just because you cannot understand it until you experience it. But what we do know about it is that heaven is entirely good. There is only goodness, and there is no death. There is no death, so the soul lives forever. Now you might think that the soul is going to get bored. What do you do forever? But actually, imagine a pleasure. Imagine a pleasure that has no end. So every pleasure that we know in this world, you can get. If you have too much of it, you don't enjoy it as much as if you have less of it, or as the first time. So with physical pleasures, the more you have of it, and this is true with all physical pleasures, the more you have of it, the less you appreciate it and the less you enjoy it. Could still be good, but it's not going to be the same as it was. It's not going to be the same as it was if it was less frequent. It's not going to be the same as it was the first time. So that's how it is with physical pleasure. Imagine the pleasure that we cannot fathom this, but imagine the pleasure that you have in heaven, which first of all we cannot understand what type of pleasure that is, but imagine whatever pleasure this is, it only becomes better and better and greater and greater. So the more you have of it, the better it gets. So every day in heaven, it's like you're growing and advancing, and it's becoming more enjoyable and more great. So again, we don't have an understanding of what this pleasure is, but it is the ultimate pleasure, and it's an infinite pleasure. It's a pleasure we cannot understand, because it is so great, and it's so different than anything that we know, because we live in the physical world. But imagine, if you will, and this also we cannot imagine, but try to imagine that not only do you not get bored of it, but it gets better and better and greater and greater. Now, the reason the reason why we cannot understand the pleasure of heaven is because of our bodies. Because our body is so central to us, everything is about the body. So what we find pleasurable is what feels good to the body. It's what feels good to the body. If it makes you feel good, that's pleasure. And all different types of pleasures. There's more physical pleasures and more refined and more spiritual pleasures, but it's all about what makes the body feel good. Now, once the soul leaves the body, all of these pleasures all of these pleasures that make the body feel more comfortable are not, are basically no longer interesting to you as the person. It's basically no longer pleasurable and no more exciting and no more interesting because there is no body there to make you to give you that that feeling. So whatever pleasure it might, whatever pleasure it be that you might be thinking is the greatest pleasure, or whatever pleasures you enjoy, it could be many pleasures. All of these things the soul doesn't need in heaven, because think about all of the pleasures that you enjoy. It's all about what makes the body feel good. It's all about what makes the body feel good. As soon as the soul leaves the body, all of these things are not going to be pleasurable. And it's still you. It's still you, because like we said in the beginning, the core of you is the soul. The core of you is the soul. So this is you. But now, because you don't have a body, you're no longer excited by these pleasures. So what I'm trying to say is two things. The pleasures that you think are pleasurable now, the soul is not going to appreciate when there's no body. That's number one. And number two, the pleasure that you will have from heaven is something so out of this world and so unbelievable and so amazing that human beings, a soul in a body, in this world, we have no way to grasp. We have no way to grasp what this pleasure might be. And you could see, if you have your text sheet in front of you, I put a whole chapter of the Rambam, Maimonides, on explaining what heaven is. And I just gave you the some of the main points, but this is what the Rambam say, and this is what many commentaries say, and there's many verses that he brings to support this. But it's basically showing that this is what our sages craved for, and this is what Judaism talks about as the ultimate pleasure and the ultimate life. But being that we are in a body, and our body is so central to us in this moment, that everything is about what makes the body feel good, we're not able to comprehend, we're not able to appreciate what is this unbelievable spiritual pleasure that is in store for for the soul. This is at the end of the journey of the soul and heaven and hell. I should mention, and this maybe is for another class also, that there is a dispute in the Talmud, but what the conclusion is, most of the Torah scholars and most of I would say the mainstream understanding of Judaism is that heaven is not the ultimate. Even this unbelievable stage and this unbelievable pleasure that we talked about, even that is not the ultimate. And the ultimate is Tchiyat HaMetim, the resurrection of the dead, that again the Kabbalah talks about, and the Torah makes certain references to it. The resurrection of the dead, it's one of the 13 principles of the Jewish faith, and that is that the soul will once again come back to life in a body as we know it at a later stage, and that is the ultimate. That is the ultimate time. It's the time of Mashiach. It's the time when there'll be only good, and it's going to be in a physical way as well. So try to imagine everything that we said in the spiritual. Try to imagine that all of that plus more you get back when you're back in the physical. So this is just to make your mind spin a little bit more. But with this, hopefully, I think we covered a lot of, and hopefully answered some of the questions. I think we talked a lot about the journey of the soul, what happens before a person is born, what happens during the life, where does it go from there on. But I think I'll come back to the way we started this class, that the most important thing is the here and now, because I think what we learned from this is that we have an opportunity today, every single moment of our life. We don't know how long our life is, but what we do know is that every moment we have the power, we have the ability to accomplish, to work first and foremost for ourselves, for society, for the world around us, but even for people who already passed on, for loved ones, for parents, for friends, whoever it might be. Thank you everyone for joining. I'm here all night, and feel free to ask me questions now or anytime later on.